The blue and red lights flashed in my backyard when I realized just how far this had escalated. Officer Thompson stood near my pool gate, notepad in hand, while a soaking wet teenager pointed at me as if I were some kind of criminal. The boy's voice cracked with exaggerated distress as he claimed I'd locked him out illegally and threatened him. But I could see it in the officer's eyes, something wasn't adding up, and he knew it. The kid's story, backed by his HOA-owning mother, Karen, had more holes than Swiss cheese, and I had the evidence to prove otherwise. Let me back up 3 weeks. My name is David, and you've lived in the Maple Ridge subdivision for 5 years without any major incidents. That all changed when our HOA elected a new president. Her name was Karen Peaton, and she lived right next door. From day one, she treated her position as if she'd been crowned queen of the neighborhood. Every morning, I'd see her marching down the sidewalk with her clipboard, hunting for violations like she was on some kind of holy mission. My backyard pool had always been my sanctuary. After long days at the accounting firm, I'd come home, take a swim, and unwind. The previous neighbors had been respectful of boundaries, but Karen seemed to believe that being HOA president granted her special privileges. It started with casual comments about how beautiful my pool area looked and how the whole neighborhood should be able to enjoy such amenities. Then came the day found my pool gate wide open. At first, I thought I might have forgotten to latch it properly, but when I checked my security cameras, there they were, Karen's son, Tyler, and 3 of his friends, helping themselves to my pool as if it were the community center. They'd been there for over 2 hours, leaving wet towels on my deck furniture and empty soda cans scattered around. I walked next door and knocked politely. Karen answered with her usual fake smile that never quite reached her eyes. I explained what I'd discovered, showing her screenshots from my security footage on my phone. She barely glanced at them before waving her hand dismissively. Her voice took on that condescending tone she used at HOA meetings. She informed me that, as HOA president, she had shared access rights to all exterior amenities, and that included my pool. According to her interpretation, her family was entitled to use it whenever they pleased. I stood there stunned. The woman actually believed that being HOA president gave her the right to trespass on private property. I tried explaining that my pool was on my property, not a shared HOA amenity, but she just smiled that infuriating smile and suggested I review the bylaws more carefully. Then she closed the door in my face. That night, I did exactly what she suggested. I read through every page of our HOA bylaws, and nowhere did it grant the president or anyone else access to private property. In fact, Article 7 specifically stated that all pools, patios, and other backyard improvements remained the sole property of the homeowner. I highlighted the relevant sections and made copies. The next morning, I had a keypad lock installed on my pool gate. The locksmith assured me it was top of the line, and I set a code that only I would know. I also put up a new sign that read, "A private property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." If Karen wanted to play games, I was ready. 2 days passed peacefully. I actually started to think the lock had solved the problem. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, I came home early from work with a splitting headache. As I pulled into my driveway, I heard shouting from my backyard. My stomach dropped as I recognized Tyler's voice. I rushed through my house and out the back door to find Tyler straddling my fence, one leg over, trying to climb down into my yard. His face was red with frustration and anger. When he saw me, he didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Instead, he started yelling that I had no right to lock him out, and that his mom said he was allowed to swim whenever he wanted. I told him calmly but firmly to get off my fence immediately and leave my property. The kid actually dared to argue with me, claiming I was discriminating against him and violating HOA rules. I pulled out my phone and told him I was calling the police if he didn't leave in the next 10 seconds. Tyler scrambled back over the fence, but not before shouting that I'd regret this. He stormed off, and I thought that was the end of it. I should have known better. 20 minutes later, I was making myself some tea when I heard sirens approaching. To my shock, they stopped right in front of my house. 2 police officers walked up my driveway, and I met them at the front door. The lead officer, a tall man with kind eyes, introduced himself as Officer Thompson. He explained they'd received a 911 call about a homeowner threatening and falsely imprisoning a minor. My jaw dropped. That little brat had actually called the police on me. I invited the officers inside and explained the situation from the beginning. I showed them the security footage from the previous trespassing incident, the new footage of Tyler trying to climb my fence, and the highlighted sections of the HOA bylaws. Officer Thompson reviewed everything carefully while his partner, Officer Rodriguez, took notes. Just as I finished explaining, we heard a commotion outside. Karen had arrived, and she was in full performance mode. She burst through my still open front door without invitation, demanding to know why her precious son was being traumatized. Her voice reached that special pitch that could shatter glass as she accused me of child endangerment and threatened to sue. Officer Thompson held up his hand to stop her tirade. His voice was calm but firm as he explained what they had discovered. Not only was Tyler trespassing on private property, but he had also made a false 911 call. The officer's words hit Karen like a bucket of cold water. Her face went from red to white in seconds. Tyler was called over from where he had been waiting on the sidewalk. Officer Rodriguez explained to him the seriousness of making false emergency calls and trespassing. The boy's bravado crumbled as he realized he might actually face consequences. He stammered out excuses, but the evidence was overwhelming. Officer Thompson turned to me and asked if I wanted to press charges. I could see Karen's eyes widen in panic. For a moment, I considered it. Then I looked at Tyler, who suddenly seemed very young and very scared. I told the officers I would be satisfied with a formal warning, but any future incidents would result in immediate legal action. The officers documented everything and gave Tyler an official warning. They made it crystal clear that if he set foot on my property again without permission, he would be arrested. Karen tried to argue, but Officer Thompson shut her down quickly. He reminded her that HOA positions did not grant special privileges to violate property laws. As the police prepared to leave, Officer Thompson pulled me aside. He complimented me on having such thorough documentation and security measures. He also mentioned that false 911 calls were a serious offense that could result in fines up to $5,000 and even jail time. The comment was loud enough for Karen and Tyler to hear. 3 weeks later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a letter from Tyler, clearly written under duress, but attempting to apologize. The handwriting was neat and careful, like someone was watching over his shoulder as he wrote. He admitted he was wrong to trespass and promised it would never happen again. Karen, however, wasn't done. She filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, claiming I was creating a hostile environment and demanding the thief force me to provide pool access to board members. She even suggested the HOA should fine me for installing a lock without approval. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. I arrived prepared with copies of the bylaws, the police report, and photos of the no trespassing signs, but I needn't have worried. Apparently, Karen had been annoying other board members with her interpretations of presidential powers for months. When Karen presented her complaint, board member after board member questioned her reasoning. George Harrison, the treasurer, asked her to show where in the bylaws it granted her access to private property. She fumbled through papers, growing more flustered by the second. Another member, Janet Liu, mentioned that Karen had tried to use her presidential status to get discounts at local businesses, claiming she was representing the HOA. The discussion that followed was brutal. Multiple homeowners stood up to share stories of Karen overstepping boundaries. One mentioned how she demanded a key to their shed to inspect it. Another talked about her trying to dictate what flowers they could plant in their own backyard. When it came time to vote on Karen's complaint against me, it was unanimously rejected. But the board wasn't done. George made a motion to hold a vote of no confidence in Karen's presidency. The motion was seconded immediately. Karen's face turned purple as she realized what was happening. The vote was swift and decisive, 7-1, with only Karen voting to keep herself in power. She was removed as HOA president effective immediately. As the gavel came down, Karen let out a shriek that probably violated several noise ordinances. She grabbed her papers and stormed out, but not before knocking over a water pitcher and calling us all jealous losers who couldn't recognize true leadership. The final twist came when the board reviewed the HOA's financial records more carefully after Karen's removal. They discovered she had been using the HOA credit card for personal purchases, claiming they were for neighborhood improvements. The unauthorized charges totaled over $8,000. The board voted to pursue criminal charges for embezzlement. When the police showed up at Karen's door with a warrant 2 weeks later, the entire neighborhood watched from their windows. She was charged with felony embezzlement and faced up to 5 years in prison and fines up to $25,000. As they led her away in handcuffs, she screamed that this was all my fault, that none of this would have happened if I had just let her son use the pool.